Hello, everyone. Thank you for sitting here with me today. Thank you for bringing your ears, your minds, and most importantly, your hearts. Because what we're about to talk about, it's heavy, it's uncomfortable, and it's not polite dinner conversation, but it's real. And it's something that has shaped far more of our lives than we sometimes admit. We're here to talk about trafficking, but not just the headline horrors of kidnapping and organized crime. I'm talking about how many of us have been trafficked all of our lives, even if no one ever physically chained us, even if we never stood on a street corner, even if we grew up in houses with pretty curtains and polite Sunday smiles. Because trafficking isn't just a crime, it's a system. It's a belief that human beings can be bought, sold, used, discarded. And until we see how deeply that belief runs, even in places that look righteous and respectable, we'll never break free. People sometimes ask me, why talk about this? Isn't it enough to focus on the worst cases, the raids, the handcuffs, the criminal rings? No, because the horror we see in headlines is only the fruit. The roots run deeper. Trafficking thrives in systems where people are valued for what they produce, how they look, who they belong to, or how they can be exploited. It happens in families, in churches, in cultural traditions, in businesses. Sometimes it hides behind scripture, sometimes behind a business suit, sometimes behind traditions so old that people barely question them. I'm speaking today because I've seen how trafficking happens in plain sight, and because I believe speaking the truth is the first step toward freedom. Let me tell you a story. Once, I knew a man whose father was a pastor, a man of God, someone people trusted for spiritual guidance. He wasn't just a pastor, though. He was also a businessman. He owned used car lots. He owned a hotel. And behind the walls of that hotel, he sold women. Rooms that looked respectable from the outside became cages for exploitation on the inside. People would drive past that hotel, maybe wave if they saw the pastor standing outside. They'd greet him at church on Sunday. Meanwhile, women were being trafficked under that roof. It's tempting to think trafficking wears a scary face, that traffickers are easy to spot, monsters in dark alleys. But sometimes they're the ones shaking your hand after service. Sometimes they're the ones blessing your meal. And sometimes they're the ones everyone calls sir, or pastor, or dad. That's why I say many of us have been trafficked all of our lives. If not directly, then through systems and beliefs that normalize exploitation. Let's talk definition for a moment. The United Nations defines human trafficking as the recruitment, transportation, transfer, harboring, or receipt of persons by means of threat, use of force, or other forms of coercion for the purpose of exploitation. Sounds simple enough, but it's broad for a reason. Trafficking isn't just about physical force, it's also deception, emotional manipulation, financial control, abuse of power, taking advantage of vulnerability. And the purpose of is exploitation. Sexual exploitation, forced labor, slavery-like practices, forced marriages, domestic servitude, organ removal. Yet most people hear trafficking and think of abductions or international smuggling. The truth is, trafficking is a mindset. It's the belief that human beings can be owned, used, traded, that some lives are worth more than others, and that mindset has existed for centuries. Let's look back at history for a moment. Slavery. Millions stolen from Africa, shipped across oceans, sold, bred, worked until they collapsed. That was trafficking. Entire economies built on human bodies. Dowries. In many cultures, when a woman marries, her family pays the groom's family a dowry. It's called tradition. But what it often meant was buying a husband's acceptance. A woman's worth reduced to gold, cattle, or cash. If the dowry couldn't be paid, sometimes marriages were canceled, or women were beaten or killed. That's trafficking. bride price. In other cultures, it's reversed. The groom's family pays for the bride. Again, a transaction. Women traded like property to cement alliances or produce heirs. Trafficking. Arranged marriages. Not all arranged marriages are abusive, but many are. Children married off before they're old enough to consent. Women forced into unions they never wanted. Trafficking. Child labor. Children worked in mines, factories, and farms, sold by desperate families for income. Trafficking. Adoption scams. Even some legal adoptions carried trafficking elements. Babies stolen, falsified paperwork, sold to the highest bidder. Trafficking. Fast forward to today. We'd love to believe we've left those practices in the past, but look around. Corporate trafficking. People working 16-hour days for starvation wages. Children mining cobalt for our cell phones. Entire industries built on cheap, exploited labor. Trafficking. Sexual exploitation. Strip clubs. Pornography. Sugar baby websites. Not every sex worker is trafficked, but many are. Lured by false promises. Trapped by threats, addiction, or financial despair. Girls marketed as fantasy experiences, sometimes underage, often forced. Trafficking. Domestic servitude. Nannies, housekeepers, caretakers, passports confiscated, wages withheld, threatened with deportation. Trafficking. Religious exploitation. Communities still marrying off girls too young to consent. Religious leaders demanding sexual obedience from followers. Churches preaching submission while hiding predators in leadership. Trafficking. Cultural narratives. A woman's worth was tied to virginity, marriage prospects, fertility, beauty. Women starving themselves, surgically altering their bodies, risking death to fit a mold. Is that legally trafficking? No. But spiritually, emotionally, psychologically, we're trafficking women's souls for society's approval. We've been trafficked all our lives. So what I mean when I say that is this. We've been taught our worth is measured by what we give others. We've been shamed into silence. We've let ourselves be used because the alternative felt more dangerous. We've been told love requires sacrificing ourselves. We've had our bodies, labor, or gifts taken without fair exchange. Some of us experienced it violently, others through everyday erosion, but all of it leaves scars. What happens when human beings are treated as property? We disconnect from our bodies. We distrust even those who love us. We develop shame around our sexuality, anger, and needs. We stay in jobs, marriages, or churches that harm us because we fear losing security. Because when you've been trafficked, when your value had a price tag, you live in fear of being discarded. One of the most painful truths about trafficking is how blurred the line is between choice and survival. People say, why didn't they leave? Why did they stay? Because sometimes the choices are exploitation versus homelessness, silence versus violence, compliance versus starvation. Survival does not equal consent. Individual traffickers are criminals, but they thrive because systems allow them to exist. Poverty, racism, patriarchy, classism, corruption in law enforcement, religious doctrines that silence victims. Unless we tackle those systems, traffickers will always find new victims. Here's the truth nobody wants to admit. Traffickers don't always look like criminals. Sometimes they wear suits. Sometimes they stand behind pulpits. Sometimes they own hotels and preach salvation on Sundays while selling women on Saturdays. That's why trafficking is so hard to eradicate. because we don't want to believe it could be someone we know, someone respected, someone who can quote scripture. But it happens. And until we're willing to see that, it will keep happening. Recognizing the signs. Look for people working long hours, living where they work, unable to leave. Workers whose wages are withheld for debts. Immigrants whose documents are confiscated. Children with expensive gifts they can't explain. Partners who control every move, every dollar. Adults describing sex or labor as the only way to survive. People avoiding medical care for fear of being reported. And look inside yourself. Do you feel obligated to give others access to your body, time, or emotions because they helped you once? Do you believe your value comes only from what you produce or how you look? Do you feel unsafe saying no? These are red flags, not just for criminal trafficking, but for lifelong commodification. So how do we heal? First of all, we name it. Speak the truth, even quietly at first. That wasn't normal. That was exploitation. I deserved better. Truth breaks shame's grip. Number 2, learn your rights. No one owns you. Not family, not partners, not employers, not pastors. You have the right to say no. Number 3, find safe community. Healing can't happen alone. Find therapists who understand trauma, support groups, faith communities that honor your dignity, friends who respect boundaries. Number 4, break the silence. Telling even one trusted person can transform shame into freedom. Number 5, question traditions. Ask, who profits from this tradition? Who is harmed? Does it honor human dignity? Does it honor human dignity or treat people as commodities? Number 6, redefine worth. We are more than what we produce, more than how we look, more than how we please others. We are worthy because we exist. So I want to leave you with this. Trafficking doesn't start in alleys. It starts in minds and systems that say some people matter less. Bodies can be bought. Labor is cheap. Women are property. Children are bargaining chips. We must destroy those ideas wherever we find them, in families, in churches, in boardrooms, in governments, in our own minds. And we must teach the next generation, your body is yours. Your voice matters. You are not for sale. Love never demands secrecy or silence. I know this talk might leave you feeling raw or even angry. Good. Anger is holy fire. It burns away lies. It fuels change. So let's be angry and let's be brave. Because when we name the truth, we begin to heal. When we see the system, we can break it. And when we refuse to be commodities any longer, we reclaim our lives. Thank you for listening, for caring, for daring to look beyond the surface. May we all walk free and help others do the same.